So there's a new diabetes med that's recently been released, and it was released from Lilly, that's the pharmaceutical manufacturer. But this drug has some very profound effects in terms of glucose management as well as weight loss reduction. Currently, semaglutide has been heralded as the king of the hill in terms of weight loss, but it looks like Mounjaro, aka Tirzepatide, will now most likely take the cake. And first and foremost, I will declare that I am not affiliated with Lilly. I'm not sponsored by them. I have nothing to do with Tirzepatide or Mounjaro. I've just been looking more into this drug, and I'm quite fascinated with it, and I wanted to share more for informational purposes. Let's talk about the components of Tirzepatide. And it's comprised of two incretins. The first one is called GIP, or glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide. GIP is also historically known as gastric inhibitory peptide, but for nomenclature purposes, we're going to call it GIP from here out. And the second one is GLP, which is glucagon-like peptide 1. Now, these are again referred to as incretins, and incretins are hormones released in the GI tract in response to the presence of food. Now, after you eat, these incretins modulate the release of insulin from the pancreas in response to the food you ate. That's why these are called insulinotropes or insulinotropics. Just like FSH and LH are gonadotropins, these are insulinotropins. So again, it's got GIP and GLP, which are insulinotropins. And these peptides are involved in something called the incretin effect. And the incretin effect is a phenomenon in which orally consumed glucose induces greater stimulation of insulin release than does IV infused glucose, even when the same levels of plasma glucose levels are accounted for or they're achieved. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the vast majority of insulin being released is regulated through our gastrointestinal tract. Now, in healthy patients, non-diabetic healthy patients, the incretin effect it's responsible for about 70% of postprandial insulin release, and GIP plays 2/3 of that role. Remember that. GIP plays 2/3 of that role, and GLP only plays 1/3. On the other hand, in diabetic patients, the incretin effect, it's lost. What does that tell us? It tells us that postprandial glucose levels are not going to be managed because both GLP and GIP is lost. But we also extrapolate that GIP may be the principal one that has more responsibility. Tirzepatide obviously exerts these actions through receptor activity. Now, Tirzepatide binds GLP receptors with less affinity than does native GLP. On the other hand, Tirzepatide binds GIP receptors with equal affinity as would native GIP. If you remember just a few moments ago, I mentioned that in diabetics, the activity of GIP and GLP is impaired or seems to be lost, and that GIP seems to be the incretin that accounts for 2/3 of the activity. Well, by binding those receptors, specifically with more binding activity to GIP, that's how it exerts a lot of its effects. And this cumulatively results in net effects of reducing glucagon, increasing both first and second phase insulin release. It increases insulin sensitivity. It delays gastric emptying, similar to semaglutide, because that's also GLP. But furthermore, unlike GLP, GIP also hits receptors in the brain. That further promotes even more satiety. So not only are you getting that delayed gastric emptying, which affects through mechanical mechanisms, but by crossing and hitting GIP receptors in the brain, you're also getting satiety from CNS mechanisms of action, and it also has endocrine mechanisms of action as well. So if you haven't heard of Tirzepatide, aka Mounjaro, up to this point, this video I hope served as a good primer for you.